morning, both. Thanks for joining me. As you both know, but for our listeners and viewers, we're here to talk about cloud and, more importantly, security and the importance of that, and maybe some of the common misconceptions. For both of you, I know you know, but for those watching, I'm Chris Gaff. I work in our cloud team as one of our customer success managers here at Bytes, and James, I'll throw over to you, joined by both of you.
Yeah, hey, look, thank you for having me. I'm James Marshall. I'm an Azure Success Manager at Microsoft.
Hi, both. So I'm Nicole. I'm one of the cybersecurity consultants at Bytes. Been here about 6 years for my sins, and spend my time talking to customers about all things cybersecurity.
Brilliant. So, Nicole, I think where we start the conversation, or a logical place to start, is for those customers and those businesses already in the cloud. They already have a cloud infrastructure. What are some common challenges and some common themes you see within security in those existing cloud infrastructures?
I think a lot of the time we find customers are just not configuring their cloud environments very well. There's so many misconfigurations, or they're not using any kind of benchmarking or posture management just to make sure that their cloud environment is secure. A lot of the times, when we were on premise, we used defense in depth on premise to basically secure the perimeter right down to the applications and the data. But we don't often see customers replicating that in cloud environments. So you'll find a customer who doesn't have a firewall around their cloud infrastructure, who are still not doing the basics like multi-factor authentication, who are not even securing the applications and the data that they're using. So I think a lot of the challenges are quite similar to ones we had on premise, but there's additional complexity with cloud because now we have additional things like containers, and we're actually building applications within these environments. So we're not securing our code as we're developing it. And I think that element of defense in depth on-prem really should be replicated in the cloud to go through all of the layers from perimeter right down to the data to be securing that environment.
Yeah, and I don't know, James, if you'd agree, or things that you see that kind of come up where maybe you're brought into a conversation with ourselves or speaking to a customer and they've been running in the cloud. We saw a good level of adoption, shall we say, because of the pandemic and other things that have happened in recent years. And I imagine you join calls and join meetings and just think, how are you running in the way you are? What are some common things that you see?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think security, if you're a business where IT is not the thing that you do, it's just an enabler for you to do your core business, professional services, legal, construction, whatever you might be doing. Security can seem like a really daunting topic because you often hear scary terms. You hear of, the sort of bad things that can happen if you don't take it seriously. It seems like it's desperately technical and maybe a bit beyond what you can get to. And so it's easy to kind of put it to one side and think, well, we're in the cloud, hey, right? The cloud's secure. Surely everything's going to be great. And I think the key thing is just to get the basics right. If you can do the most fundamental things, I mean, you mentioned about multi-factor authentication, just getting that turned on for all your users to better protect their identities from credential theft and that kind of thing, you're already doing much more than a lot of other people to protect yourselves, and that's not very difficult to do. By the time you get up to some of the more advanced capabilities, you do need help from a partner maybe, or you need to rethink your overall strategy. But I think a lot of people just rush to the cloud because they're excited by the productive opportunity that it means. They can get, they can scale a business more quickly, they can grow, they can, enable their people to work from anywhere more straightforwardly, whatever it might be. It's just really important to always bring security as part of that rather than trying to do it after the fact. Because if you can design it with security from the start, it's way easier than if you get 6 months down the line, you've embedded a bunch of processes that you've now then got to revisit and think, actually, how do I go back and secure that? And I think that's the mistake a lot of, I think non-IT focused businesses make, is they rush to the opportunity, but security is the afterthought. I think we just got to help them see that they've got to do it the other way around.
Yeah, and I think I hope you'd agree, Nicole, that You know, what we're not saying is if the horse is bolted, you have no chance. But maybe put some guardrails in place if you haven't started that journey. And James, I'd be interested to get your thoughts in a moment on that. But for those that are already there, it's not too late, but it is important to take a bigger view and a step back and make sure you've got policies and guardrails in place before then starting on Project Y or whatever may be coming next, right?
No, absolutely. And Microsoft in particular have put a lot of features and functionality in place to be able to do this. So if you're already in Azure or AWS or GCP, there's tools in place today that you can use to help you, even if you are already in the cloud. The benchmarking tools to measure you against compliance standards like Center for Internet Security, a very basic security standard, but that tool is there to measure how your tenant is configured, to show you where you've misconfigured or where you've not configured something at all that could boost your security. Those kind of tools are already there to help you. And you'll find as you look at more and more of the security offerings within the Microsoft world or Azure world, they're supporting other cloud environments. So you don't necessarily have to think about securing clouds in other services or in other with other products. You know, they've kind of put a nice little bundle around it, and we'll chat about that shortly. But within the tool sets that are there, there's capabilities to secure your code, to secure your applications, to secure your containers, to secure your keys. So the tools are there. We're just not often seeing our customers adopt some of those tools that are inherently available. So absolutely, you still can do that. But I think if you're making the journey into the cloud, some of this should certainly be thought out beforehand. And planned beforehand, doing things like landing zones and making sure the fundamentals are in place at the start certainly help you down the road. But I would say absolutely the tools are there today to do that.
And I guess let's take that as a tangent, James, and bring you back in. Let's flip it, and you're speaking to a business, partners brought you into a conversation, they have aging data centers or, you know, contracts expiring. They've got a new CTO in whose vision is cloud first, and they've never dipped their toe. They maybe have some SaaS offerings, 365 or something of that nature, but they come to you and they say, by the end of 2025, we want to be all in the cloud. What are some useful pieces of advice and some useful tools that they could think about before embarking on the journey, so they're not trying to coax the horse back into the field, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ones I think is the way you did something on-prem doesn't have to be the way you do it in the cloud. So you mentioned about securing the perimeter and some of the defense in depth strategies that we've used for years, securing on-prem workloads. The way we architect in the cloud can be different. For sure, you can just do a shift from A to B, move your VMs, move your container instances or whatever. You know, you can replicate that model in the cloud. You can do that. But there are things that you can do in the cloud through platform services rather than infrastructure services, or through, you know, the way we handle security in a scalable way. You know, you can re-architect things to take advantage of the cloud capabilities that you didn't have on-prem. Or indeed, if you're going to do this over a period of time, think about that hybrid approach. You don't have to have an on-prem approach and a cloud approach. You can actually use some of those cloud tools to help protect your on-prem and hybrid environment seamlessly and easily from sort of one place, rather than having multiple different tool sets. You know, you think about being able to bring all of the logging together and all of your event management together, or, you know, securing all of your endpoints from one tooling or whatever it might be. These are things that you can do if you rethink, as you do that migration, how we take advantage of that capability. If you just rush at it and go, right, we're going to use Azure Site Migration, we're just going to go from A to B, replicate everything as it was, and then shut down on-prem and just do it in the cloud, you probably miss those opportunities just to rethink. And if again, just like what we said before, if you do it at the beginning of that journey and start with that view of we're always going to try and take the best of what the cloud can bring and augment how we work today, it just makes managing your cloud environment so much easier. I mean, you mentioned about the tooling there, right? One of my favorite things is you can get scores and insights and recommendations now that tell you very simply in plain English what to go and do to make your environment better optimized, better secured, avoiding pitfalls and mistakes, leaving ports open or running underutilized, VM capacity, whatever it might be. And it's just a fantastic list of just go do these things. You will improve your overall score. And then it makes it very simple to communicate to your non-IT stakeholders how well you're running your environment, right? Because you have a security score and it was X on one day, you implemented a bunch of recommendations and it's Y the next day. Isn't that so much better than just sort of finger in the air, not really being sure if this is the right way to do it or whatever? You have a ready-made set of recommendations. And I love that because it simplifies the whole process. You still need help maybe if you're not a specialist. That's where our partners play a great role. Obviously, Bytes is fantastic for that. But it's a great starting point for people to look and see actually, oh yeah, I haven't turned on MFA. I should probably get to that. Or I have left these ports open. I should probably think about closing those or securing them in a different way.
And I think if, you mentioned kind of the scores and the benchmarking, one thing that I always find quite interesting as well is that this isn't theoretical data. This is based on, you look at the capabilities within Azure. If you're an insurance provider, it will show you your security posture score versus those of your theoretical competitors in the market. And that's not a kind of fear-mongering tactic, but this is what other businesses, your peers, are doing in this space and how you compare. And that can be used as both a pro and a con. But I think certainly making sure that you're not missing a trick in certain things, as you've mentioned earlier, enabling MFA seems like a really, on the basis of it at least, a really easy thing to do. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, but from a risk versus reward side of things, if you're increasing your security posture in the cloud, you then give your business the confidence then to start looking at moving things to PaaS services or exploring containers, as you'd mentioned. I think having the view of taking that step back, which I keep mentioning, of okay, well, what is our risk strategy overall, rather than, your devs go over here and spin something up, tell you it's ready, throw it in the cloud. Well, what policies, what blueprints have you thought about, things like RBAC, etc.? These are all just as important, if not more important, in the cloud than they were on premise. And I think at times we just need to make sure that we secure things before we start looking at all of the additional benefits that cloud infrastructure can give us.
It's a great time as well to revisit just how many people have more access to things than they need. Certainly, before I worked at Microsoft, I worked in the public sector, in schools. And, back then the world was very different. The way we connected to the world was less omnipresent as it is today. But nonetheless, we still had lots of IT to consider. And it was startling when I reflect back on it, just how much permission so many people had to do things to their own devices or to the network. The concept of kind of least privilege, just enough access, just in time, those kinds of principles, like they were probably around as industry principles, but by the time it got to little old me working in a school who didn't have the greatest training, didn't have the greatest budget, certainly didn't have loads of time, it was probably a little bit easier just to say, I'm going to make you an administrator, or I'm going to give you this privilege, because it just gets the problem off my plate and allows me to get to something else. And then how often do you ever go back and take it away? You probably don't. And then they get used to the fact that they can, reset somebody's password without them having to come up to the IT office, for example, or, install an application without having to wait for me to come and configure the package for them or something like that. And you end up with this creep over time that you never really have the time or energy to go back and audit. When you move into the cloud, it's that great opportunity to be like, right, let's clear the decks here. Like, you don't need all these people with access to all of these things, or we have all of these file shares, which probably are a bit unsecured. As we move to the cloud, we're going to think about securing those, particularly if you want to go on that AI journey. Permissions and governance become really important, not just because you want to protect against cyber threats, but because you want to make sure that these models have access to the right information for the right people in the right way. So it's a really good sort of inflection moment to kind of say, right, we are going to do the really sometimes, bit boring task of revisiting some of these baselines or whatever, but it's really important because if you get it right, everything is so much easier down the line.
I think there's still a challenge though with customers who feel like Microsoft or AWS or GCP should be doing their security for them. So that shared responsibility model is still something that needs to happen in these conversations with customers to understand, yes, Microsoft play a part, but you have a responsibility as well. And I don't know, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's something that comes up quite a lot, and it kind of comes up regardless if somebody's already on this cloud journey or just embarking, is this view and maybe this common misconception that, well, I'm in a hyperscaler, I'm in Microsoft Azure, they have all these accreditations that I didn't have on premise, therefore I don't need to worry about security. And within reason, there are elements of that are true. You know, do you have to go and, I don't know, worry about if the data center door's locked? No. Or are you patching things correctly? You know, it sounds very silly and very trivial, and to a certain extent parts of it kind of is, but at the same time I think the naivety of, well, I've put it in the cloud, it's someone else's responsibility, can lead to quite a lot of risk and sleepless nights. In the same way, I remember one of my first roles in IT was looking at kind of working with organizations around backup solutions on premise, and you know, you speak to an IT director, when was the last time you checked your backups are working, and you just see them go slightly pale. And it's similar in the cloud. You know, you think the shared responsibility model, yes, okay, that hardware side of things, and depending on the model, if it's IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, there are other pieces that are run by your provider of choice all the way up to everything and including the software itself. But you still have to look at who's got access to what. The least privileged piece comes into play there. You still need to make sure your data's secured. Depending if it's IaaS, you still need to make sure that your firewalls are configured properly. And yes, okay, that provider may provide that solution and that service for you, but it's still on you to create those policies and set the boundaries of what you as an individual for your organization thinks appropriate from a risk side of things. I think it's very easy to kind of move that blame onto somebody else, or move that risk onto somebody else and say, Microsoft, you're responsible for my infrastructure. But if something goes wrong and you realize you've not read the fine print, and it sounds very, I guess, fear-mongering, but it's a case of take a step back and just check and make sure you're comfortable. And I mean, there's countless things. Before we sat down today, it's just embarrassing to admit, I Googled the shared responsibility model, and you can find it online of who looks after what. On-premise, you looked after everything, of course, and then as you move up through IaaS and move it to PaaS and SaaS applications, your responsibility does lessen, but data and users still inherently will always remain the importance of you as an individual and you as your organization, rather than whichever cloud provider you suggest. I don't know, James, you probably come across this all the time of somebody, you may be on a call, you're talking around kind of improving that security score that you mentioned before, and I'm sure you hear it quite often of, oh, well, you guys look after that, don't you? And I don't know, are there any kind of common themes that come up or misconceptions there?
Yeah, I think in some ways there's an extra layer of abstraction, right? Where you know, like you say, you've got Azure as a platform, or Microsoft 365, whatever it might be, coming from Microsoft. You know, obviously we have the data centers, we provide that service. But then there's a layer in the middle of typically an enablement partner who might be just reselling the technology, might be billing themselves as a managed service provider or a security partner or whatever it is. They sit in the middle. And then, of course, you've got the end customer, and then the end customer's users and all the people that are consuming the technology. And so when I think about that shared responsibility sort of model, if you like, the thing that I think trips everybody up is lack of communication from the outset. You're absolutely right. There's elements from a technical sense of what does Microsoft do in providing a secure cloud platform for you to use. There's things that we can do. And there's responsibilities that fall upon the user of that. Like, you can build Fort Knox, but if you leave the front door open, it's still useless. So you've got to take those things seriously. But I think it's the communication piece at every level, sitting down and saying, right, we're your managed service provider, or, we want to bring our business to you and for you to be our managed service provider. What does that mean? And I think people shy away from having that open conversation and being really specific, and that can lead to confusion. And I've seen examples where there have been customers who have been using services quite successfully for a long time under the belief that their partner was providing everything, taking care of security, taking care of availability and uptime and all of those things. And then one day they have a breach, a phishing attack is successful, credentials are compromised, their environment is, used for crypto mining, or something goes wrong. You can imagine, right? And then you do the kind of post-mortem of how did we get here? What went wrong? And often it comes back to, well, we thought they were doing it for us. And then you speak to the partner and they say, no, we just provide the subscription, the environment for you to do it, but actually you're responsible for securing your users' credentials. But because they'd never had that conversation when they started doing business together, we make assumptions. And assumptions lead to, problems like when it all goes wrong, you play the blame game, that kind of thing. So I think the thing I would love to see happen more is that transparency in that early phase of, these are the services we provide, these are the things we do, and then perhaps more explicitly, like, these are the things you're responsible for. And, maybe it is ensuring that you're using multi-factor authentication. Maybe it is ensuring that you have all of your endpoints enrolled into Intune, for example, or, you're using, you're using policies to ensure that any device has to be connected to the right corporate network or whatever it might be. You make it clear. And I think once people have that conversation, then the shared model makes a ton of sense, because you're not then having to guess who's doing what. Everybody's happy, everybody's clear. And then when it comes to, if there is ever, unfortunately, an incident or a breach or something that has to be, dealt with, at least you know the role everybody was playing. And then you can help diagnose what happened and learn from it, rather than it being this, well, we thought, they thought, sort of comedy of errors.
It makes a lot of sense what you're saying, and I think you mentioned your service provider and what they can do, and obviously that's why we're here today, to talk around what, I guess, that co-delivery model of Microsoft and Bytes can look like. And Nicole, I want to pick your brains around specifically what we can do, but maybe before we do that, and this isn't a product pitch, we're not trying to suggest that you go out and buy this or that, but what are some really easy tools that Microsoft themselves can enable their customers to use to really start thinking about their cloud posture and their security?
I mean, there are loads, they show up in different ways. I think there are some built into our identity tooling and our productivity tooling and what have you from an Azure perspective. I like to think about Defender for Cloud. That's a rich set of capabilities that covers kind of everything from securing your developer workloads through to your more classic workloads across multiple different clouds. It covers your posture management and gives you insights, and it's one set of tooling that kind of brings all of it together in one place. And it's quite straightforward to activate, quite straightforward to use. And like I said, for me, the one of the sort of big benefits is going back to what I was saying earlier about, you have some on-prem, a bit of hybrid connectivity, and then you have some that's cloud exclusive. Your Defender helps you manage all of that sort of more seamlessly, whether that's on-prem in a data center maybe, or in a cupboard under the stairs, wherever you've got those workloads hosted, or maybe it's in another cloud. But, you can use those tools to kind of bring it together. Sentinel's another great example of a SIEM solution where you can bring signals from lots of different places together under one roof, rather than having to have multiple different solutions to kind of deal with all of those sorts of things. But Defender for Cloud, I would say, is a great starting point. We could sit here all day and sort of peel through all of the different components of it. And like you said, we're not kind of here to kind of sell every piece. But I would say, even if you're just looking at the sort of most basic, covering your servers with Defender, or maybe your databases, it's taking that first step on a journey of just being better at securing your workloads versus just leaving it switched off or not really ever looking at the insights that it can bring.
I think, Nicole, if I come to you on that, and it is a case of being better and striving. You know, security is an ongoing conversation. It's not we've ring-fenced it, we've boxed this off and we're fine. But you look at, James mentions things like Defender for Cloud, things like Sentinel. These are Microsoft tools. I guess what I'd be interested in our listeners and viewers taking away as well is, where do we come in as Bytes? What can we do on top of the cloud native tools that are out there to really help enhance someone's security in the cloud?
I think our strength comes in the skills and the people that we have and the capabilities that we have in-house. And those stretch across, you know, working with Azure, implementing Azure at the start, helping you with a migration or helping you build a hybrid environment, right down to different teams and consultants who understand different technologies and solutions to bring it all together. So I would say that's our strength. That's what we do day to day. We try and be as agnostic as we possibly can, understanding your use cases and understanding what makes the most sense. But we also have the people in-house to guide you on that journey. People who've been building cloud environments and hybrid environments for years. People who understand security, who understand modern workplace, and who have an overall view of the overarching architecture and strategy of what you're trying to do in a business from an IT perspective. So I think that's where our strength lies, in being able to utilize our people to be able to deliver these projects and these solutions. But also we have really great partnerships. You know, Microsoft is one of the best ones, but with all of the other security partners, with the other cloud partners, we bring them all together so that you have one person to deal with, which is us, to hold that conversation for you. So I think our main strength would be the people and the skills that we have in-house beyond accreditations and partnerships. And yeah, that's what I think would be our strength.
No, I like that. And I think the other thing, and I agree with you, the kind of 60,000 view of this is what the market's saying, this is what we're seeing, maybe this is what has worked for some and hasn't worked for others, so that, you know, one of the things that we're really good at doing is almost kind of being that litmus test of a business will come to us, they may have their own in-house security team, so it's not a case of we're not trying to preach or tell you this is the only way you can do it, but we can give you those bits of advice of, well, we've seen a business similar to you do this, they then did this, so why don't you do this first? And I think the other thing that, you know, we almost take for granted because we do it day in, day out, but it's then working with the likes of Microsoft where we can get a lot of these projects kind of partly or completely funded to look at that kind of initial investigation stage and kind of proof of concept stage of, well, we think we want to look at a Defender for Cloud, a Sentinel, whatever that might be. We want someone to come in and look at our firewalls, whatever that is in the cloud, but we just don't have the resource in-house to do so. And one of the things as a Microsoft partner that Bytes kind of has access to is funding to allow us to do that work for you and to really have a look at that. So I guess I appreciate we're coming up for time and don't want to obviously keep you all day, but I think, you know, I would kind of say to anyone kind of listening to this, if there was one or two things, maybe if each of you have kind of one key takeaway that maybe you've learned from the conversation, or one other thing you wanted to say is to leave people with a thought to go away and think about their cloud security. James, I'll start with you maybe.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the two things would be, one, Defender for Cloud is a really straightforward way to start protecting your cloud workloads and your hybrid workloads. It's reasonably priced, so it doesn't have to be a bank-breaking exercise in adding security into the way that you're working. And I know Bytes is obviously a fantastic partner in being able to help people understand more about what that can be. So I would say definitely check that out. But the other one, and perhaps the most fundamental one, is don't shy away from the conversation. Don't make security the thing that you're afraid to talk about. Pick up the phone, ask for help, ask for a bit of a shakedown. Just like come and take a look at our environment, help us figure out what we're doing. We know we need a little bit more help, or we know we could be better at this. Just bring it out into the open as a conversation that you're really happy to have, because no one's if you've left the door open, no one's going to get in trouble if you then help get it closed. But if you just leave the door open and then hope that no one's ever going to let themselves in, then that's when the problems occur. So I think just get the conversation had, start to see where you can use those scores and insights to get better, and before you know it, you'll be in a much stronger, more confident, more secure position than you've ever been in. But if you never have that conversation, then it's like Pandora's box. You're just sort of leaving it to one side and just we won't open that, and that's not a good thing.
How about you, Nicole?
I would say, if you're making the journey or you're already on the journey, taking the step back to look at the bigger picture of what security means for you in your environment. Like you said, things can be changed, things can be re-architected with the cloud. So don't be too scared to have that conversation, to say we don't have to do the way we did things before. And there's all sorts of tools and support available now that you don't have to figure it all out yourself. There's loads of people that can do that. So I think for me, it's being able to take that step back and say, are we doing this right? Are we using our tools right? And can you support us with this? Absolutely.
No, and yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think, selfishly, if I look at my role at Bytes and how I work with our businesses, and I think it is exactly that of, I'd love kind of the call to action from our conversation to be just reach out, ask to speak to any one of us or your account manager, whoever you may work with at Bytes or at Microsoft, to explore that and to actually let's have a look at what you're doing, not what the industry says, not what's best practice necessarily, not these are the common 6 things we see, but tell us this is how we've set up these policies. Tell us what we can be doing, what we should be doing, what we can't be doing, and then between Nicole, yourself, and James, Bytes and Microsoft, we can put a plan together to enhance that security and then give you that cloud infrastructure that I think most businesses, when they move to the cloud, it's because they want to be more agile, more scalable. They want a faster time to market for some of their new applications and products. Without that opening of Pandora's box, as you said, without setting those foundations in place and knowing that you've got a clear, secure backing in the way you would have done on premise, it's very difficult to do that. So I think that would be my closing thought would be reach out, let's have a conversation, we'll bring in some industry experts and let's see how we can help you with some simple steps, be it Defender for Cloud or whatever that might be. But really appreciate both of you giving me some time today, and I hope everyone watching and listening found that as interesting as I did.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.